Aegon the Uncrowned was born in 26 AC to the then Prince Aenys Targaryen and Lady Alyssa Velaryon. He was named after the Conqueror himself and was said to have bared a striking resemblance to his grandfather. His elder sister Rhaena was born 3 years prior in 23 AC, and there was still some debate about who took precedence in the line of succession, Rhaena or Aegon's second son by Visenya. Maegor was no doubt where Prince Aegon sat. He would follow his father, Aenys, as Aenys would follow Aegon the Conqueror. Alyssa gave birth to another son for Aenys, Viserys. Then in 34 AC she gave birth to a third son, Jaehares, and finally in 36 AC her fifth child, a daughter, Alsyanna. Prince Aegon, along with his younger brother Viserys, was with their grandfather when he died of a stroke on Dragonstone in 37 AC. King Aegon was showing his grandsons the chamber of the Painted Table and telling them the stories of the conquest when he collapsed. After his father's ascent as king, Prince Aegon travelled with his family overland to Oldtown for the coronation. He was 11 years old at the time. It was said the young prince relished and shone with the cheering of the crowds that lined the roads to Oldtown. It was in 43 AC that Aenys announced that he was to marry Aegon to Princess Rhaena. The princess was 18, the prince 15. They had been close since childhood. Though Aegon had never claimed a dragon of his own, he ascended to the skies more than once with his sister on her dragon, Dreamfire. With the tradition of intermarrying in House Targaryen, marrying his eldest two children may have seemed obvious to Aenys, more so as the affection between Rhaena and Aegon was well known, and neither of them raised objections to the match. Some speculated that the two always anticipated the match, but the backlash was fierce, and took all involved by surprise. However, such signs as the outcry over Maegor's taking a second wife were there. The Faith had at least ignored the Conqueror and his sisters, but were not willing to do the same for his grandchildren. The Faith declared the match obscene and an offence to gods and men. On the day of the wedding, the warrior sons in their silver armour lined the streets, making note of all the guests that attended. Most wiser lords, expecting the Faith to do this, had not gone, but still, despite all, Aenys proceeded with the wedding. The king didn't seem to understand the true extent he had aroused the realm against him. Eager to win back the favour of the small folk, he decreed that the prince and princess would make a royal progress through the realm, no doubt thinking that the cheers that greeted him on his royal progress would follow his children. Perhaps much wiser than her father, Princess Rhaena asked his leave to bring her dragon, Dreamfire, as any trouble along the way swiftly be dealt with a dragon nearby. But Aenys forbade it, as Prince Aegon had not yet ridden a dragon. The king feared that the lords and the commoners might think that his son would be unmanly who saw his wife on dragonback and him upon a mere horse. From the first day they set out, Aegon and Rhaena and their escort were jeered by crowds of the faithful wherever they went. At Maidenpool, not a single septon could be found to pronounce a blessing at the feast Lord Mouton threw in their honour. When they reached Harrenhal, Lord Lucas Harroway refused to admit them to the castle unless they agreed to acknowledge his daughter Alice as their uncle's true and lawful wife. Everywhere across the realm, it was becoming clear a religious uprising was about to take place. But Aenys, being the man he always was, carried on as usual, not truly understanding the danger of the situation House Targaryen had now found itself in. The warriors' sons seized the gates of King's Landing, giving them control over who might enter and leave the city. In the Westerlands, Prince Aegon and Princess Rhaena were forced to abandon their progress and take shelter in Crackhall Castle. Martin Hightower, the new Lord of the Hightower and voice of Oldtown, proclaimed that the High Septon was the true king of all Westeros, in all but name. King Aenys by this time had fled to Dragonstone and had grown extremely sickly and ill. When news reached him that the poor fellows and the warriors' sons had surrounded Prince Aegon and Rhaena at Crackhall, he suddenly collapsed and died 3 days later. The realm was in open rebellion, and its supposed new king was trapped halfway across it. The now Dowager Queen Visenya did not attend her nephew's funeral. Mere hours after his death, she had mounted her dragon Vhagar and flown east across the narrow sea. When she came back, she was with her son, Prince Maegor, upon blaring the Black Dread. Maegor only stayed on Dragonstone long enough to claim the crown. His mother placed it on his head as lords and knights knelt as he proclaimed himself king. By the laws of inheritance, the lords Aegon the Conqueror set out, the Iron Throne should have gone to King Aenys' eldest son, Prince Aegon. Maegor simply told the Grand Maester that the Iron Throne will go to the man who has the strength to seize it. He then executed the Grand Maester with a single swing of his Valyrian steel sword, Blackfire. Maegor and his mother went on to consolidate his rule by taking King's Landing, taking the battle to the Faith Uprising. It would seem that Maegor had a strong grip on the throne, despite the weaker claim. He had his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread himself, to ensure no one dared raise the question of Prince Aegon. Aegon and Rhaena had fled Crackle when the poor fellows moved to the capital, Battle Maegor. They moved to Casterly Rock under the protection of Lord Lyman Lannister. It was his wife Jocasta who first worked out that Rhaena was pregnant. With Aegon soon to have an heir and Maegor childless, this both strengthened Aegon's claim but also put him more at risk from Maegor. All his life Prince Aegon had been the heir to the Iron Throne, but suddenly found himself abandoned by many he thought were his friends. Maegor's supporters grew by the day, and the common sentiment was Aegon was his father's son, suggesting that he possessed the same weaknesses that brought down his father. They pointed out that Aegon had never ridden a dragon, while Maegor had claimed Balerion. Even his wife Rhaena had her dragon, Dreamfire. His mother, Queen Alyssa, attending Maegor's third wedding, although forcefully, was proof to many she had abandoned her son's cause. Though Lyman Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, refused to hand Aegon over to Maegor, he did not go as far as to pledge him his sword. It was at Casterly Rock that Rhaena gave birth to Aegon's daughters. Twins they named Eria and Rhaella. The High Septon decreed the girls abominations, born of incest and accursed of the gods. The Maester at Casterly Rock claimed after the birth, Rhaena begged her husband and brother to take them all across the narrow sea, anywhere beyond their uncle's reach. She said she would willingly give up Aegon's right to be king, but only to keep their girls safe. But her plea fell on deaf ears, as Prince Aegon was determined to claim his birthright. King Maegor, after the faith had been pacified, visited Oldtown for many weeks, where he would reconcile with his first wife. The king's long absence from the capital had not gone unnoticed by Prince Aegon, who was quick to seize his chance. Emerging from Casterly Rock, Aegon the Uncrowned and his wife, Rhaena, raced across the Riverlands with a handful of companions and entered the city concealed beneath sacks of corn. Aegon dared not seat himself upon the Iron Throne yet, as he knew he had no chance of holding it. They were there for Rhaena's dragon Dreamfire, and so that Aegon could claim his father's dragon, Quicksilver. They were aided by friends in Maegor's own court who had grown weary of the king's cruelties. They made their departure on Dragonmark. Aegon and Rhaena returned to the Westerlands to assemble an army, as the Lannisters of Casterly Rock were still reluctant to openly back Prince Aegon, but his followers did gather at Pink Maiden, the seat of House Piper. John Piper, Lord of Pink Maiden, had pledged his sword to the prince, but it was still believed that it was his sister, Melanie, Rhaena's girlhood friend, who had won him to the cause. The lords and knights who followed Aegon were mostly Westermen and River Lords. However, some Vale Lords came as well, as did the Conningtons of the Griffin's Roost in the Stormlands. From Lannisport came 500 men under the banner of the bastard son of Lyman Lannister, Sir Tyler Hill, by which ploy the cunning Lord of Casterly Rock lent supporters to the young prince, while still keeping his own hands clean. 15,000 men had joined the rebellion as Aegon the Uncrowned began his march across the Riverlands to strike his claim to the Iron Throne, led by the prince himself on King Aenys' beloved dragon Quicksilver. Though their ranks included seasoned commanders and many knights, no great lords had rallied to the prince's cause, but Queen Tyenna, mistress of Whisperers, wrote to warn Maegor that Storm's End, the Eyrie and Winterfell and Casterly Rock had all been in a secret communications with his brother's widow, Queen Alyssa. Before declaring for the Prince of Dragonstone, they wished to be convinced that he might prevail, and that Prince Aegon required a strong victory. This gave Maegor all the motivation he would need. He would deny his nephew that victory. From Harrenhal came Lord Harroway, from Riverrun Lord Tully. Sir Davos Darkland of the Kingsguard marshalled 5,000 swords in King's Landing and struck out west to meet the rebels. Up from the Reach came Lord Peake, Lord Merryweather and Lord Caswell, as did their levies. Prince Aegon's slow-moving host found armies closing from all sides, each smaller than their own, but so many that the young prince, still only 17 years of age, didn't know what to do. Lord Corporate advised them to engage each foe separately before they could join their powers, but Aegon didn't want to divide his strength. Instead, he chose to march on towards King's Landing. This decision would be a fatal one for Aegon the Uncrowned, and the coming battle would be a bloody one, forever remembered in history. Aegon found himself surrounded on all sides. Just south of the God's Eye, he found Davos Darkland of the Kingsguard with forces from the capital blocking his path. Even as reports of Merryweather and Caswell forces advancing from the south and Lord Tully and Harroway from the north, Prince Aegon commanded his men to charge Darkland, hoping to break his line before the other loyalists could assault his flank. Aegon mounted Quicksilver to lead the attack himself. As he took flight, men below began to shout and point skyward. Balerion the Black Dread had appeared in the southern sky. King Maegor had come to join the fight. For the first time since the Doom of Valyria, dragons were to do battle. Quicksilver was 1/4 of the size of the Black Dread. He was no match for the older, fiercer dragon. Quicksilver and her power-white fireballs were engulfed by the great black flames of Balerion. His jaws closed around Quicksilver's neck and ripped a wing from her body. Screaming and smoking, the young dragon fell to earth, Prince Aegon the Uncrowned with her. The battle below was just as brief. Once Aegon was dead, the rebels, seeing their cause doomed, mostly fled, but they were surrounded and there was no escape. By the end of the day, 2,000 of Aegon's men were dead, with Maegor only losing 100. 6 months of trials and executions followed. Only the king's mother, Dowager Queen Visenya, could persuade Maegor to spare some of the lords. One key person not killed or captured was Rhaena Targaryen. She had remained at Pink Maiden Castle with her and Aegon's twin daughters and her dragon Dreamfire. It's debatable if Rhaena could have changed the course of the battle, as Dreamfire was still a young dragon and Rhaena no fighter. When word of the battle reached Rhaena, she took the news in a stony silence, something that would become a trademark feature of her. Fearing her uncle's wrath, she gathered her daughters Arya and Rhaella and fled to Fair Isle, where the new Lord Marc Farman, who had lost his father and elder brother in the battle, gave her refuge. He swore no harm would come to her or the girls. For a year the people of Fair Isle looked east, waiting for a sight of Balerion's dark wings. But Maegor never came. King instead had returned to Red Keep, where he grimly set about getting himself an heir. But that's beyond the scope of this video. The story of Aegon the Uncrowned is a tragic one of a young boy whose eagerness and inexperience led to his downfall. What makes him so tragic is the sheer potential he had to be a good king, having both the influence of Aegon and Aenys. It's a story of wasted potential. What adds more depth to this is that his wife Rhaena and his twin daughters would also share a similar tragic end. It's the waste of a whole branch of the Targaryen dynasty. This is just compounded more when you consider the kind of king Maegor Targaryen was. But without Aegon's fate being this way, the rise of one of Westeros' greatest kings would not have happened, his younger brother Jaehaerys.